And now, right to your hosts of Down the Garden Path, Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing.
Welcome to Down the Garden Path, where we discuss down-to-earth tips and advice while doing our best to help you seasonally manage your garden and landscape. Hello there, everyone. I'm Joanne Shaw, owner of Down2Earth Landscape Design, and with me is my co-host and co-author, Matthew Dressing. Hello there, Matt.
Hello, Joanne, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am Matthew Dressing, owner of Natural Affinity Garden Design. As landscape designers and gardeners, we believe it's important and possible to have great gardens, which are sustainable and low maintenance, and we want to help you make it happen.
That's right. And I am wearing a sweater tonight because it is finally cooler. Like even yesterday, people kept saying it's going to be cool, it's going to be cool, but I still found it quite warm. So yay. So it's our, first Monday in September. We are dealing with some cooler temperatures, gray skies here in the GTA. It never really rained, did it? Did it rain in Oshawa? No?
Nope. No rain here, just kind of threatened it and cooled everything off.
All day. Yeah. It's funny, all day. So cooler weather brings and fall and people getting back out into their garden always brings up questions about lawns, right, Matt? So everyone, what condition is your lawn in this summer right now? What do you want it to be? Do you use a lawn alternative in your lawn? We would love to hear from you at Down the Garden Path podcast at hotmail.com.
That's right. Yeah, we always get lots of lawn questions all around now. What can I do? Summer's over. It's getting cooler. There's rain.
I know.
So we'll talk about that, I think, tonight.
That's right. And I was just thinking that I was joking with Gary that you're the lawn specialist, but you don't own a lawn.
Yeah, really, right?
But that's okay. You still know what to do, and that's why we need you to tell us what to do.
Yes, I don't own a lawn. I have lots of family members. I advise. I get to
That's
see
right.
what they do.
You can come over and take care of mine anytime.
Yes, and lots of people always write me and say, "Oh, I did what you said, and it looks so great." So, yes.
He knows what he's talking about, people. He knows what he's talking about. So, and we often, this is the time of year. I mean, throughout the whole show, I mean, we do have our lawn lovers or lawn loving gardeners, right? But it's been, and I want to talk a bit more about that as we go on too, as far as lawn alternatives, because there is still starting to be, as much as there's lawn lovers, there are some lawn haters, right? And when you still think about, you posted something recently, right? That post about what's wrong with the birds and the insects and stuff. What's going wrong? What are we doing wrong? And you said your lawn.
Yeah.
So yes, we will get to that. But let's start off positive, right? Should we start the show positively?
Yes. Exactly. So what state is your lawn in after this crazy summer? We've had it was cooler, a little bit more moist in the beginning, and then we very quickly jumped up to 30 plus degrees with the humidex, and we recently had a little bit of rain, but we haven't had any of the weekly, more sustaining, watering rains until just the other week. So we were going, I think we had hit like 5.5 to 6 weeks of drought there. And look at the news too. Everyone around the world has had weird rain. I think Pakistan is underwater. Meanwhile, China's rivers are all drying up. So it's been a mixed bag for everybody. I know the lawns that I have had that I've been looking after this summer, they're pretty green. A lot of my clients have irrigation systems. So we're setting them up to be running once a week, or a few of them, others have every other day or every 3 days to a lesser than an inch amount. But for the most part, they're green and or they are shaded. So they're still green because, the water and the grass is nice and cool. But how about your lawn? How is your lawn doing?
I have to say mine's doing pretty good. I really just stopped. Like, I know we had that imminent to that intense heat and drought, we just stopped watering it, or stopped cutting it. So it was, we usually let ours go, and the neighborhood were let ours go the longest. But this time we just let it go, and it just stops growing. So it went dormant, but it stayed pretty green. So it was, and I guess I don't understand, bless my neighbors, and they're good friends, but they, even in the drought, even with the dormant lawn, kept cutting the grass, and it was growing so little, and they're like skinning it, and it's so, and I'm like, whereas yes, my grass was longer, but it was green. And so then it really kind of greened up even more when we had those rains a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And so then once we got through that, then I kind of said, okay, now we should cut the grass. But we went like probably a month without cutting, and it wasn't like it kept. I think people are worried it's going to look messy, or it's going to get lawn or go to seed, get those seed heads and stuff. But when it's dormant, it really doesn't do that. Like, it just really stayed.
Yeah, but
long and green.
Exactly. Yeah, she just kind of stalls out and does her thing. And when it's longer, she's shading herself a little bit too. So
right,
she's able to keep that green going, most certainly.
Yeah, and I think it also, when they cut it really short, I think you definitely see the yellow, and I think it takes longer for the yellow to come back even after a rain, or the green to come back when it's gone, when it's short and yellow. So
yeah, because there's nothing really, when it's nice, short and yellow, there's so little chlorophyll and chloroplast available to create food, so she's drawing on her own energy. But if there's nothing, there's no water in the soil, or you're not watering it and it is dry, it does take a little bit for that to ramp up. And again, now you've got it really, really short. You've got the sun and the wind hitting that growing tip, and all the grasses that we grow here in Canada or the GTA in the northern areas are cool season grasses. So they thrive in that temperature of 16 to 22. So when we get really warm, they start to go to sleep. That's where we see right the middle of summer, and we keep our lawn short and they start to go dormant. Yeah.
That's right. So I do want to just reassure everyone that, like, if people prepared and planned to not cut their lawns, the last 2 weeks in July, the first 2 weeks of August, I think you'd really be surprised at how much money, time you save, fertilizer you save, and just the stress of worrying about it. It doesn't go to seed. It doesn't keep growing, and it's going to get really look like nobody's living there. It's fine. The only part I do regret is my city trees, which, I know is a whole other show, but because they're in my lawn, and I wasn't watering the lawn. So I do want to highlight that we weren't cutting, nor were we watering. So, and it stayed green. But I think the city trees did suffer. So when I came back from holidays last week, that, definitely a lot of early leaf drop and things like that, which we talked about on last week's show. So that is the one thing I should have been doing the tree bags for the trees. But yeah, so I do want to, talk to people and just have everybody, because that is the downside of lawns, is how much resources we give to it without much benefit back, right? No insect need, like, it doesn't feed anybody. It doesn't, there's no insects that need grass.
There's no shelter that's available.
Right.
And like you said, feeding, pollen, or nectar resources. There's nothing that we can eat from it as people ourselves. So, as we get into areas or times when, food is short, or, there's the shipping crisis with all that's been going on, we could be using that space in other ways to support all those insects, much like that post I said, ever wonder where the birds and butterflies are? And then there's a big picture of just a perfectly mowed lawn, and there's just nothing there for them. So, and that's where we see things like Japanese beetles and June beetles and things are becoming more prevalent in spaces, because they have access to that lawn, and there are no predators, and they eat the other things that the other bugs aren't going to eat. They're going to eat the foliage themselves. So, so the lawn, and that's where we're going to go into our lawn alternatives, is we can still have that big, beautiful green space. We can have it green all year with our maintenance of our lawn itself. If you're a lawn purist, we've got some tips for you. If you're looking for some alternatives, maybe you go away, or maybe you do want to support a little bit more biodiversity, that's where some of our lawn alternatives are going to come into play. Reduce the resources that that space needs, but also still give you some beauty and some biodiversity back as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think the trend is going that way. I mean, me as I sprinkled my first clover lawn this year a few weeks ago, and there's definitely several of my designs in the last month, 6 weeks, have been zero lawn backyards. So if the one has an area of clover, but the rest of it was mulch and stepping stones, and two little patios. The other two, I mean, and we just finished one on Friday where, it's this really, so it was actually a townhouse, and she had an existing patio and like horseshoe shaped garden, and in the middle, she had grass that she just hated and couldn't maintain. So we made that, another patio with some stepping stones and pea gravel. And now she's got like another outdoor room and no grass to take care of. And so not only are we getting the trend of something other than lawn, like clover, micro clover, I wanted to talk about those options, but also I think people are looking at their lawns on, okay, how can, especially with the smaller homes and not great access for lawn mowing, storage, not everybody has like room in the garage for a lawnmower or room in the or room for a shed. So I think those are some other lifestyle issues that, lawns are becoming a lot more work than they're really worth. So people are looking to designers, like design professionals, for solutions other than a lawn.
Agreed. Mm-hmm. I'm seeing the same thing in a lot of my designs and consultations as well. Is people are looking for alternatives and better how to make more and get more out of their limited space, because they're at home. Yeah. So before we dive into our lawn discussion on maintaining your lawn in the coming months, as well as some lawn alternatives, I do see we have some questions that have come in.
We do.
Bob wrote fairly quickly off the top. Hi, Joanne and Matt. Joanne, that is so funny about Matt's quote lawn. Does Matt talk to lawn maintenance folks who take care of his lawn where he lives? That's funny. And yeah, my neighbor actually does.
Really?
Yeah, he looks after, he has all that sort of stuff. And so I look over my balcony and I can see, oh yeah, there's the creeping Charlie. Oh, a little bit more dandelion this year. And I get to watch him and we chat and everything. So it's so pretty funny, Bob. Next, we have Ken, who's written in, hi, Matt and Joe. Should we sharpen our mower blades every year? Yeah, Ken, that is an excellent question. And yes, you should. Whether you want to do it at the very beginning, I know of some people who choose to have it sharpened and their lawnmower serviced right before, they put it away for the year, it's sharp, they oil the blade and make sure that it's all ready in its sleep. If you start going through the year, and if you ever noticed where you mow your lawn and suddenly there's enough watering, things are good, maybe it's even spring, but there's like this brown haze over the top and it just kind of looks like it's on the tips, that's the sign of an unsharpened mower blade. So your blade is no longer literally just cutting just right through like a knife through butter. It's actually starting to rip the tips of the blades off. So what you're getting is a rip through the grass, and that brown haze is that jagged, unhealing tip of the grass. So if you cut and you start to see that you get this little bit of haze, or you start to see that, even if you just look at one or two spots, you can see where the rips are occurring versus a nice clean cut. That's your time to go and give a good blade sharpen. You could also buy a second blade as well. Keep one sharpened and keep one unsharpened and keep rotating them out. My number one tip though, for anyone who is using a mower, if you ever need to flip the deck, if you've got like a 20-inch standard, walk behind mower or gas powered anything, if you ever need to look at those blades and those decks, make sure you pull your spark plug out of your mower first, because you can cause it to short or jolt, and I have seen those blades make a half turn when someone flips it over and they just jostle it enough, or there's just enough charge left in there, and I don't want you to see to lose anything from you, lose any fingers or cut your hand or anything like that. So safety tip: always unplug that spark plug from your gas powered mower.
Excellent, excellent. I'm also curious how many people have switched to the new electric mowers, or the battery mowers. We've kind of gone slowly. We're transitioning to all the Ryobi devices. So yeah. So we can actually add that on to the end of the show, or anybody who's comments about those. We really like them. Yeah. We don't like it when the last person to mow forgets to plug it back in, but
Yes. You don't have two batteries on the
we do, yeah. And Carl has written in, good question. Yes, we did have we both were talking about that before the show. We had a nice weekend holiday, thank you. What about those fake lawns that you see advertised? I'm not sure if they are AstroTurf or something else like that. Do you know much about them? I'm retired, and that option seems like a really good one, so that I do not need to cut the lawn or water it. Thank you very much. So we have done a show, right? We did do a show with Durham
Artificial Turf.
Thank you, Durham Artificial Turf. All about artificial turf, Carl. Lots of different opinions there.
Yeah, but it is something definitely that you can end up doing. Some people love it. I think on the show I mentioned, when I was in downtown Vancouver, a lot of the condo buildings they've replaced all that lawn with artificial turf that they just go out and power wash, and it looks great, and they leave it. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think the one thing to keep in mind, Carl, is it's cost prohibitive. Like, it's not. It's the same price as putting in a patio, really. So that's something to think about, that you could do, make a larger patio and a larger garden area, and then not need grass. So the work of doing it, the materials to do it properly. So it's not, AstroTurf that, you buy at Home Depot. It is, there's a lot of important steps there as far as drainage, excavating, adding different levels of granular stone and leveling it. And then there's lots of hardware that kind of secures it to the perimeter of the yard. So it's a process, and with it comes a price tag. So definitely. And I can see both sides of, some people say it's super not environmentally friendly because it gets hot and it doesn't, what do you do with it, in 20 or 30 years? Durham Artificial Turf said, a lot of it is recycled and reused for, whether it's dog shelters, like anything that's, disposed of. It isn't, well, most of it, we hope. I'm sure some of it sneaks into the landfill, but they really do try to reuse it or recycle it. So that whole, is it better, a better resource than all the work and money and fertilizer and water that we put on? Like, it's tough, right? It's a tough call, because regular grass does require so much work. So, and resources, the water, the fertilizer.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of, it's looking at, which resources are you going to use?
That's right. So we'll put our show, when we put the link to the,
I was going to say,
yes, to that previous show in the show notes, Carl, so you can go back and listen to that episode all dedicated to artificial turf. So thank you for that question.
Dan has also written in, hi, I actually have not cut my lawn for over 4 weeks here in the GTA, and it looks great. What does lime do for the lawn? Thank you. Excellent. Yeah. So Dan, glad your lawn is looking good and you're enjoying that green. What lime does is it raises the pH. So it's going to bring up the pH and the availability of certain nutrients in the lawn. Grasses tend to enjoy, especially our lawn species, enjoy more of a neutral pH. So close to that 7, where most of the other plants will enjoy anywhere from a 5.8 to a 6.2. That pH just basically allows the water to dissolve a certain elements into the soil solution for the grass. So they just like it at a little bit of a higher pH. So if you see that you have wet areas and maybe moss is growing, or you've had some pine needles or some evergreens removed, and you've got lawn in that kind of area now, that's where you might have a pH issue, where it grows, but it doesn't grow as vigorously or as sparsely despite, the watering and the full sun and everything else being needed. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what our lime does.
That's right. That's right. Justin has written in as well. Another really great timely question. Justin, thank you. Is this the right time to put down nematodes? Yes, it is. Right, Matt?
That's right. And I was just thinking, as we're going to say, Durham artificial turf in the show notes will also link to John Robertson from Natural Insect Control and his show all about applying nematodes and the myths around them. But yeah, right now is the time. So we can apply our nematodes. Today would be a great day. It's cool. It's cloudy here in the GTA. Doing it later in the evening, and then just follow the instructions, because everybody has a slightly different package and the way they're grown. Some are in vivo, some are in vitro. So just kind of follow those instructions and put them down and keep them evenly moist. You don't want to flood the lawn, but just keeping that upper 1 inch to 2 inches evenly moist. Watering just the lawn to make sure that at night with this, and it's the only time I like to say you can water at night is when you're watering the lawn. Make sure that you're not watering everything else around you. So any molds or funguses and things like that start to take over.
And if you do share your lawn with your neighbor, that neighbors that kind of both share a lawn, you really do need to do their lawn too. It's really one of those things. They swim and they move. So it's kind of a waste if you don't do the neighboring lawn. That's something to think about. And so we've had that John show, but you and I've done several shows on nematodes as well. So you can definitely look for those and past shows. And the period of time, so you kind of have another month, right? I would say starting now to the beginning of October.
Usually about beginning to mid-October, Thanksgiving, kind of, depending on how warm the soil is and what the temperature outside is. That's usually kind of when things cool off and they start, both the grubs as well as the nematodes start to swim further down. So,
and our good friend Roy has written in with a good question for you. He's saying that he has heard you use the term biodiversity. And he says, I've heard that term before, but what does it actually mean? Thank you. And you're right, Roy, I'm thinking, I've heard that too. I'm not really sure. So let's see what Matt says.
So biodiversity is the act of having lots of different species, whether they're plants, insect, birds, funguses, all sorts of things in one space. So if we think about the lawn, we look at our typical lawn, what is there? We're going to have the grass, which might have 2 or 3 species of lawn in it. We'll have some insects that are in the soil, like white grubs. Ants might be there. There might be, again, some microorganisms that are there, and maybe 1 or 2 diseases, depending on what your lawn is. So there's only a handful of things there. So if something goes wrong, it's very easy to get 1 or 2 of these things and knock them out of the system and damage the lawn or make that area dead. There are no checks or balances. So for example, another good example would be street trees, right? When we see the street is lined with 1 row of trees, there's no biodiversity there. The tree is just a monoculture of, say, Norway maples. So if something comes in and kills the Norway maples or damages
ash trees,
like the ash trees, that was exactly, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
The ash trees. We had the emerald ash borer come in and wipe them all out. So now we're losing major street trees that are providing shade, cooling houses, saving us money, making life enjoyable, and now they're all gone. So if we had ash trees mixed in with other native maples or oaks and other trees, we might have lost 1 or 2, but overall the ecosystem of a cooler area, moisture being retained in the soil, protected by the trees, a cooler environment around the streets for the people, that would not have been as affected. Would have taken a hit, but it wouldn't have been as affected. So biodiversity basically allows us to have all of these interlocking systems of insects and plants and microorganisms to basically keep everybody healthy and keep everything in check. There's always a predator and there's always some prey, right? And that's the biodiversity that we want to create.
Yeah. And if you want to do a deep dive on that topic, Roy, Doug Tallamy, what's the name of the book? Nature of Things? Is it?
I want to say that's it, but I might be thinking
Yeah.
of, isn't that David Suzuki show?
Yeah, no, yes, that's true too. Oh my gosh. Okay, we'll come back to you, Roy, but it is fascinating because we're, it's not just about the insects, and there are things that when that insect disappears, there's a bird that eats that insect or that caterpillar, and then
Yeah.
when there's no longer that caterpillar, then we lose those birds, and then there's another bird or something that eats those birds, and that, you know what I mean, like the whole, we always joke about circle of life and Lion King and all that
Yeah.
stuff, right? But it's true,
But
and
that's what it
it's,
is.
yeah, and so it's at these minuscule little levels. And I always kind of talk about, I've mentioned it before in the show, that I can remember, as a little kid driving home at night to my grandparents' house in Niagara region, and like my dad like having to put the wipers on for all the bugs and all those bugs in the windshield at night. And I don't remember doing that for my kids at all, for bugs, like where did those bugs go, kind of thing. So it just shows you in my lifespan,
you had that loss of biodiversity.
Yeah.
And we were spraying and ripping up fields. And we wanted to mow lawns, and we had bigger lawns, and we lost those things. I think you posted as well, and I've seen some other social media about wasps. We hate wasps, but and hornets as they come and bug us, especially in the fall. But they are actually great predators of other insects, aphids and small caterpillars and all sorts of things. They help. They are one of our checks and balances for us. So when we start to lose things, we lose that underlying support that keeps us all going and happy and healthy.
That's right. Yeah. And so to keep going, Roy, with your question, it is Doug Tallamy, New York Times bestseller, Nature's Best Hope, a new approach to conservation that starts in your yard. So really good book. I heard him speak. He spoke at Landscape. Remember, we heard him speak several, our pre-COVID landscape designer conference. He was there, and I can remember just sitting there with my mouth open, like, oh my gosh, I never thought of it. And if the industry of horticulture were shocked by the things that he says, then it had something, it was really unbelievable, right?
Yes, it really is. Yeah. It really is. It's unbelievable. So yeah, definitely take a look at that book, because like you said, designers are just like, wow, what? Oh,
I know.
I had no idea. And that's how my plant selection impacts everything, and how it all moves out. And I think we were talking with Mary Phillips and the monarchs and native plants, and that all kind of ties into that big food World Wide Web type of thing. So
that's right. Sure. That's right. So
just as we hit the bottom of the hour, Tina has written in Christmas. Hey, down the garden path, Christmas is coming, and garden books seem to be the hot ticket this year. Yes, they did too. So thank you, Tina. And don't forget to check out our book, Down the Garden Path, a step-by-step guide to your Ontario garden, which is more just your garden, because it's got seasonal timely tips throughout every month, and what you could be doing to make it as low maintenance and easy as possible. And as we talk about biodiversity, I'm going to do our little 10-minute or 10-second thing, and then we'll talk about some of our lawn alternatives. So if you do have a weaker lawn, or a lawn that you don't really want to maintain as much, we'll throw in some of those things that you can plant with your lawn to up that biodiversity and create some interest. But I just want to say thank you, everybody, for joining us here live on Reality Radio 101. Thank you as well if you're listening to the podcast, if you've downloaded it. Maybe you're on the way to work, or gardening yourself right now. I'm Matthew Dressing, here with my co-host and co-author, Joanne Shaw, and you're listening to Down the Garden Path. Joanne and I enjoy hosting Down the Garden Path each week, bringing you interesting and relevant topics to help you achieve a great garden. We learn right along with you from our research and from the guests that join us here on the show. And as I talk about guests being join us here on the show, for those of you who tuned in last week for Bob Osborne and growing hardy apples in cold climate, he will be joining us next week, September 12th, Monday at 7 p.m. here live on Reality Radio 101 to talk all about hardy apples and growing them in colder northern climates. So don't forget, you can spend more time with us down the garden path. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Down the Garden Path Podcast is our handle there. You can also find us on your favorite podcast provider. And while you're there, please hit that subscribe button to be notified of new content. And please don't forget to like, share, and leave us a comment. We love hearing from all of our wonderful listeners. You can always write us directly at any time of day or week at Down the Garden Path Podcast at hotmail.com. Don't forget, you can find Joanne online at www.down2earth.ca, and you can find myself at www.naturalaffinity.ca. So we talked about lawns and biodiversities and how it doesn't really support the bees, the butterflies, those other beneficial insects. Because remember, 90% of all insects eat other insects, although we're bothered by them and whatever, but or may or may not be. So there is some things that we can do to fortify our lawn, lower the maintenance in our lawn, those resources that we've mentioned, the fertilizers, the water that go into maintaining that green lawn, by adding some of our lawn solutions or other plants into the mix. Joanne, you had mentioned, there's the white clover. I think that's probably one of the most popular ones out there. It's just a straight white clover or a micro clover. And the idea is that it's a perennial clover that is low growing, that slowly will creep in and amongst your grass and add some nice biodiversity. It stays green. It doesn't go dormant like your lawn does in the summer. So it's not necessarily cool season. And then you also get the benefit of that biodiversity support in the spring when they throw up nice, and I mean, I'm sure we've all seen them, those nice little white globular flower heads that are one of the first things that are out there in this beginning of the season to feed those waking native bees, the bumblebees, the masons, the leaf cutters, and things like that that are coming out and looking for some food to wake up. So the other benefit of microclover and clover is that it does also fix atmospheric nitrogen in its nodes along the root. So it's also going to add that nitrogen into the soil structure around your grass. And if you look at all of our grass fertilizers, that first number is always the highest. It's like 32,018, but that's that nitrogen. That's that green that it's going to get. So it's going to be able to capture some of that nitrogen and reduce the food that you actually need to give to it.
That's right. That's right. I mean, like I mentioned, I did it for a client just a few weeks ago. We spread it. Sprinkled,
applied it, sprinkled,
replied, whatever the word is. Gotta love improv on the show. But anyway, Clover in a small area, we put stepping stones down to her shed, and she's got an area where there's going to be future vegetable boxes. And then the rest, instead of doing grass, we thought of doing clover. She also has a pet rabbit, Matt. So she was excited about that. So it's been interesting. It took and I've had different people say it's expensive, it's not expensive. Like, this was a little bag. It was a very small bag of clover, not micro clover. I could only find the white clover. So this was mid-August during that drought, and it said it would cover 500 square meters, which is a lot. And we certainly did not have that much of space, but I put it on nice and thick. And she kept it watered, and it took a lot longer than I thought. I don't know if it was just too hot for it, maybe. But I was back this past week and took a look. And so it is coming in pretty well. There's the second batch because some spots are a little spotty. The weeds are coming through the soil too. So I think that's the challenge of the grass or the clover versus the weeds. And I think the clover, regardless, it's going to be green, right? And she doesn't need to mow it. So I think that's good. So I said to her, there were some bindweed. So I kind of showed her what bindweed was. It was much more of an identifiable weed, to get rid of that. So I'm excited. She's excited that we're trying something different. And I definitely see the benefit in her situation, not having to mow it and having something that is just going to be, and she really wanted the garden that the rest of the yard was created was more, lots of pollinator plants and food for the birds as well. So a viburnum with, nannyberry for berries. Birds, butterflies, berries. Anyway, so it just feel like clover fits right in that. So yes, and then I've been doing some reading about micro clover. And another reading with their clover that there's some annual grasses that you can mix, annual lawn with the clover seeds, and then the annuals don't come back, but it helps to get the clover established. So that looked interesting, but finding that annual grass seed in the middle of August was not an easy task.
And did you end up finding the annual grass seed?
No. So we just put straight clover down. But I happened to be so when it was on holidays, we mentioned I was on holidays for that week in Huntsville, and of course I'm going to visit some garden centers. And so I got in a lovely chat with someone at one of the garden centers. And cottage country, there's a lot of naysayers that say, oh, clover's not going to work and it's a pain and blah 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 blah. Cottage country's been using it for a long time. She's like, we've been using it here 20 years on our septic systems and our lawns because, so she says it works fine. And people walk on it, can drive on it to a certain extent. It does fine in their harsher winters. I was like, you're kidding. And she's like, yes. And she said, and they also stock, like here we're like scrambling to kind of find a more than one option, right? Like, it's not like you can compare with grass seed, there's a whole 2 shelves, right? At a garden center of like what you're comparing grass seed when if you read the ingredients, it's all Kentucky bluegrass, like the mix is all the same, right? It's the packaging that changes. Yeah. And so she was saying, so I said to my husband, I said, we should go in because some of it was bulk, like, you could scoop it bulk. And I said, we should actually go and buy some, like that's bulk that we can use, or we can try out, or I can try it with clients next year. Right. And just so we didn't do that, but that was good to know. And so any of our listeners who may be in cottage country or who have used clover over their septic system, I'd love to hear from you. We both would, right, to hear how it's going. And I really think this trend is going to catch on because I think with the smaller yards and the busier people, and the people are realizing that the lawn, they still want something green, which we've had our listeners tell us, you still want it to look green and pretty, but it doesn't have to be turf, right?
Yeah, exactly. And even if you do kind of like that look of the turf, one of the other lawn alternatives that people are turning towards too, and to mix with that oh my gosh, white clover is the fescue grasses.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because they don't create thatch layers like the Kentucky blues and the perennial rye and things like that. So they're not as attractive to the European chafer beetle and other insects there. So yeah, you can get kind of that nice mix there. And then the fescue, again, much like the clover, will stand up to, that drought. It can do that traffic. It's a little bit more cold resistant and drought resistant. So it's a good one to mix in there as well. No flower, but
yeah, that's right. And I do want to shout out to West Coast Seeds, who we've been trying to get onto the show. So they definitely sell a mix. And actually, if you look at their reviews, several people put in like time-lapse videos or pictures of their progress. So nothing's better than that, right? Just seeing what people have put and how they've done it and how it's turned out. So I to have anybody who's interested and maybe Carl, that's you, maybe your option instead of a lawn, instead of artificial turf, is to do something like clover that you might only have to mow twice a year or twice a season. So take a look at West Coast Seeds, who are Canadian based on the West Coast.
That's right. And they do have a lawn solutions section as well on their website. So you can see some of the micro clovers and some fescues and some other blends that they have engineered that includes things like yarrows and other stuff as well that you can apply and purchase that way as well.
Yeah, I think also the thought that it doesn't, we wouldn't get oh my gosh, Japanese beetles and the European, you know what I mean? Like that's a whole other incentive, like let alone, never mind the water, the time, the fertilizer and the cutting. Now you've got a lawn that's not attracting insect, like that kind of insect, that kind of predator. So or nuisance. So yeah, it's another thing to think about for sure. And there's many, Matt, I think we should do a show where we do a deeper dive, but there's many ways that you can do it. You can sprinkle the seed right on your existing lawn and have that take over. There's lots of ways. The one thing the lady from in Cottage Country said was, you have to be like, there's no turning back. Like once you've done it, once you've turned it, your lawn into clover, the clover's there. Like you're not going to, oh no, I changed my mind. Let's put some grass seed next year. No, you're not going to get rid of the clover. So she said, it is a commitment. So that's something to note, because I don't want anybody to test something out and then change them, decide they don't like it.
Wait a minute.
Blame me.
Redo the whole lawn.
That's right. So for those that are growing a regular lawn, Matt, this time of year, September, cooler temperatures, what should, just briefly, what should people be doing now?
Yeah. So I think it was Justin who wrote in earlier, now is the time for doing nematodes. So take a look at your local independent garden centers, or again, if you're in the Canadian region, Natural Insect Control can send them. You can buy them directly. But now is the time to water them into your lawn, keep them moist. If you have your white grub issues, you can get rid of those guys now. It's better to do it now when they're young versus next spring when they're old. You need to put down even more in the spring than you do in the fall. But now is also a great time as the lawn rejuvenates, or perhaps you've got a good lawn already, is the good time to start aerating and dethatching. So the lawn is growing vigorously. Again, in our area, we've got lots of cooler season lawns, so they may need some time to warm up again and green up again. But once they're nice and active, we want to dethatch every about year and a half, take out all that nice dead layer that the Kentucky blues, the perennial ryegrasses, things like that do.
And is that just raking, Matt? Is that just giving it a good rake?
Yeah, good question. No, that can be just a good hard rake. So have you ever had just a leaf rake and you pull really hard and you make one good pass, and it's so hard that little dead brown bits of grass pop up in your wake of your rake? That's your thatch layer being flicked out from below.
And my shoulder pops out, but yes.
But there's also dethatching equipment that you can purchase as well. That you can it's a motorized equipment with little blades that spin like a mower, and it beautifully pulls up a carpet of thatch to be removed.
Okay.
Aerating as well. So if you've got a compacted or heavy traffic lawn, perhaps you have young kids, or it's on the corner lot type thing, that's where it would be great to do some dethatching as well. So aerating, sorry. And that's where you basically puncture holes into the soil surface to allow water and air to re-enter the root zone. We typically will see there's a little stand-on one with like 10 or 12 holes, and it's basically a large square bar, and you walk around with it and pull it out. There's lawn aerating shoes with little nails that you can put onto your shoes and walk around when you mow your lawn, just to give those holes to go into that soil surface. And typically we see what the city does, where we have, again, like that aerating machine, gas powered, and it rips out little plugs and leaves them on the grass surface for air and water and all that kind of stuff to get into as well. So now is the best time to do it. You can do it in the spring, but you don't want to do it when the grass is asleep. So you're going to wait till May. You've got 2 to 3 inches of lush green lawn, and that's when you're going to do it, around that May 2-4 weekend, or whenever your grass warm greens up like that, which might be earlier, or if you're in the southern states or a warmer climate. Yeah. Lastly, watering. As we start to get in, not lastly, we have fertilizing to do too, but as we get cooler times and cooler days, we are going to see a little bit more rain, which will wake up our dormant grass, get that yellow becoming green again. It might take 1 or 2 weeks. And if you really want that lawn to really rebound, you do want to go out there maybe once or twice, or one every day or every other day, and make sure that you're putting down an inch or so of water. Other than that, just keeping your lawn watered to 1 inch deep once a week will keep it nice and moist. The trick with our cool season grasses or those lawns, if you have a lawn that goes dormant, making sure that it gets that 1 inch and you get that nice long blade to keep that nice growing tip, nice and cool and protected from the sun. As far as fertilizing, this is probably one of the bigger changes. The numbers on the bag are going to change. So we're going to go from a high nitrogen now into a higher potassium. So the first number is going to lower and the last number is going to grow or rise. So now we're often going to see something like a 10-0-20, or if you're going organic, we're going to see a 4-3-7. So we're going to see the change in those numbers. And what that means is that those potassiums and the phosphorus, those last two numbers, as they rise, they are going to build the resistances and the roots for our grass plants. So we know we've got a cold period coming up where we're going to get snow and ice and things compacting on the grass, or more water in the lawn, and we're going to still walk on the lawn and compress and hurt the soil. We are going to bolster their resistances. So we're getting ready for them to sleep. So there's two times you're going to fertilizer. One right now around the Labor Day weekend for the first hit of our fall. And then again, our winter fertilizer, which more people probably do in the South versus up here in the GTA or northern regions, but closer to the end of October, beginning of November, just kind of a couple of weeks before that last frost date to get that in. And that's the feed that's going to take us through the winter and be when I'm sure a lot of our lawn enthusiasts have heard, don't go on your lawn in the early spring when it's moist. So we've already given its food now for them to wake up with. Whew. What do you think I missed in that quick recap?
I know. Organic. Yes, organic fertilizers, like the benefit. And are they becoming, are the big box stores carrying them?
I have not seen many at all, especially the typical bagged granular. I've seen the odd little bottle of houseplant or plant fertilizer, but it's still dominated by the synthetics like Scott's, CIL, and whoever, and Schultz.
Yeah. So I think, and I don't know if that's the case, maybe not in more of the northern country stores, right? Where they have the TSCs. Thank you. But definitely you might have to go to a garden center to find the organic fertilizers as well. So I think that's something to, if we're going to use fertilizers, and moving in that direction, I think is a better choice. Although, they tend to be slower released and better overall for our water tables and the runoff that's invariably going to happen, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, when it's with those high phosphorus fertilizers and you get all that phosphorus and those nitrogens and the other chemicals leaching into the water, and you get that big algal bloom in the lake nearby, and that's your runoff and all those fertilizers affecting things. So yeah, again, and going back to biodiversity, when we use an organic fertilizer, we're providing the components, the fertilizer as food for the microorganisms in the soil. So the soil needs to moisten the fertilizer prill or pellet, and then the soil itself starts to eat it and break it down. And it releases humic substances, which helps the soil structure and the different plates and pieces of the soil and organic matter stick and fluff up a bit. But then it also gives a more sustained, longer release to the plant itself. I often equate it to us going to McDonald's or staying at home and having a nice chicken Caesar salad or something. Right? The salad and the chicken is longer feeding.
We've had arborists say that too, right? That Big Mac versus home cooked meal.
Yes, so. Exactly. Yeah. You have a chocolate bar or some fruit. Yeah.
There you go.
So those are our lawn fertilizers. So Karen also wrote in, Joanne and Matt, please remind your listeners that even though it is cooler climate out, your lawn still needs water. Maybe not as much, but it does need water. And very excellent point, Karen. Yes, about your lawn, but also about your garden. In cooler temperatures, it doesn't heat up. The plants are cooler. They don't need to use as much water unless it's very windy. They will pull up lots of extra water, but the water evaporates and is utilized much slower by your lawn, but also by your other surrounding trees and shrubs and things. So as it cools, the sun and the heat might not be doing it, but it slowly turns into the wind doing it. So just make sure that you are keeping an eye on your perennials and your lawn. Indeed. And we often say the same thing with our evergreens, newly planted evergreens. They always have their foliage out. If we don't water them going into the cooler months, they will dry out in the wind and they will go to sleep dry. And that's where we see that wind burn. And the same thing can happen when our lawn and our other perennials just slowly dry out. They might be going dormant. The tree loses all of its leaves, but those roots are still active and still need to draw on water for their biological processes. Water is the key to everything. That's where we transport food and nutrients and enzymes and hormones and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, you can imagine when we're dehydrated, what happens to them.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So I think still watering and it's a good point. A good point that there's lots going on in, and start thinking about, now is a time too, that if you do have a smaller backyard or even a smaller front yard, you might not be ready to go to clover now, or you might not be ready to go to stepping stones and pea gravel or something like that. But you can plan for it. Like if you can identify areas that are easy to do, maybe that don't, like, it's hard to change when your lawn is connected to your neighbor's lawn, that type of thing. I totally get it. But I think now is a good time to really take a deep look at your yard and where can you maybe use an alternative and maybe try something out. And that could be the crappy lawn between yours and your neighbor's driveway. Maybe that's easy to take out and to put clover down. So I think if everybody, like, that's the thing, everybody's wanting one big thing that's going to fix it all, but I think it's going to be the micro decisions we make and the little changes the little shifts of what we all make. I think will eventually go a long way, and hopefully saving our planet and climate change. So yeah, there was somebody who said, or was it, let's look at, who has the most rain in Bangalore, and it was like all of Bangalore. Like, it's a shame. And even Pakistan, there's the amount of that they create, the greenhouse gases that country creates is very minimal. They're on like 7% or whatever, but yet they're in the forefront, like where they are positioned in the world is they're getting the brunt, with the water slides and the mud and the monsoon rains and stuff like that. So I know it's challenging because we feel so insulated, I think, from it sometimes.
It's so far away. It's easy just to focus on the little things and the daily things that we need to do. But again, we are also part of that biodiversity. Our actions affect everything else, and we're one of those keys. And I like what you were saying just about those spots to try, right, between the two driveways, or if you have corners or sharp corners on your lawn, or a corner that's always cut, or somewhere you just can't really grow anything, try again some of those, the fescues or the clovers and things like that, where they can tolerate some of those tougher conditions and a little bit more shade as far as the fescue goes, in groups of all those other grasses.
Yeah, and even gardens, if there's an area in your yard where grass isn't growing and you've got a big deck and a small yard and a small garden, going with a bigger, I know people tend to sometimes think garden is a high maintenance solution or alternative, and it's not necessarily. If you've got the right plants in the right spot, maybe a bit of investment for working with a designer like you and I, and coming up with a plan, and we can choose things like shrubs and that have got lots of biodiversity, right? And get a good size appropriate for the space, and then it's well mulched. It can, it can get tough. Then maybe you'll have to water it a little bit more the first year, but it can be way less maintenance than a lawn. So that's something, like, I think we just have to start thinking differently.
Exactly. Yep. Start thinking differently. All the little things that go into that one thing.
That's right. Yeah. So I know it's a lawn show, but should we share? And we've got an exciting news about where we're going to be next weekend.
Yes. Yeah. Or is it next weekend, or is it this Saturday?
I guess. Yeah. This coming the 10th. Isn't that next Saturday, next weekend? Oh, I guess it's Monday today. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. The 10th, everybody, September 10th. Those of you who are listening live, as well as listening on a podcast, and that are local to the GTA, Matt and I are going to be at the, hopefully you're all familiar with the Toronto Flower Market.
That's right. We are going to be there with our Down the Garden Path podcast booth with the theme of Ask a Designer. So much like our Ask Us Anything episode here on Reality Radio 101, we are going to be answering your lawn and landscape and any other plant questions that you might have with a designer theme. And we are also going to have copies of our book, Down the Garden Path podcast, a step-by-step guide to your Ontario garden, available for signing and purchase and things like that. We are also going to be signing up for our new, it's in the works, our new Down the Garden Path podcast newsletter. So keep an eye on for that. We are going to set that up so you can get timely tips and some, behind the scenes information, deals and discounts and things like that. A little bit more access to Joanne and I through our newsletter. So there, if you're there, come and buy a book or sign up for the newsletter, be one of the first. And we're going to have a little gift basket giveaway type thing there. So we would love to see as many of you and put some names to faces, or just stop and say hi. I know we've got a lot of regulars in the GTA that often write us in. So
that's right.
Yeah. So
that's Toronto, right. If you've never been there, right? The Toronto Flower Market is lots of vendors from all over Ontario that come to sell their flowers. And so it's a really great opportunity for you to buy some local flowers from some flower farms. And also see us this week. So we're going to be there the next 2 months. So they are there on the second Saturday of the month. So we're going to be there September 10th and then October 8th.
That's right. And just for the address, it's 1001 Queen Street, West Toronto. In case you're wondering where it is or you're in the area. And you can check them out at torontoflowermarket.ca. And we'll have all of that in our show notes as well.
And we're excited to teach all of the regular people that go to attend all about our podcast. So Gary, we're going to be preaching about Reality Radio 101 and introducing you all the flower lovers out there about the podcast. So which is great.
That's right. And that brings us to the end of another episode here on Reality Radio 101. Next week, stay tuned. I know a lot of you are anxious. We are having Bob Osborne return to us next week to talk all about cold climate apples, growing apples in cold climates. So get your apple questions ready for Bob, and you can write us here ahead of time, Down the Garden Path podcast at hotmail.com. to make sure you get your questions in. But we'll be talking about all of our apples. And we hope to see you again at the Toronto Flower Market this weekend at 1001 Queen Street East. I think I just said that right. Yeah, Queen Street West. Sorry, Queen Street West. Stop by and say hi. Until then, we'll see you all next week. Thank you for joining us here on Reality Radio 101. You're listening to Down the Garden Path. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Down the Garden Path with your hosts Joanne Shaw and Matthew Dressing, right here on Reality Radio 101.